What's up everybody? For today we're going to do a coaching session for our YouTube video, and we're going to focus on the snatch and a common fault in the snatch, and that's basically where on your first pull your hips shoot too high, right? So on the initial pull off the floor, sometimes a lot of people won't activate their upper body, lift that chest, or drive into the floor by extending at the knee enough. And so what ends up happening is their hips shoot high in the air to start, puts them out of position for the rest of the snatch in a compromised position, and they can't finish the lift. Or what usually will end up happening is the bar will rocket out in front of you, or you won't have enough power to finish the lift. So we're gonna go over kind of what that fault looks like, how to correct it with 2 or 3 exercises in terms of technique, and then how to correct it with a few exercises in terms of strengthening some different parts of your body so you don't run into that issue again. Okay, so if you watch the snatch or you watch this fault when somebody snatches, what you'll see is as the athlete begins to move, or as the bar initially begins to move, their hips will rise without their shoulders, right? So their hips will go up before their shoulders do, and oftentimes they initiate movement, but the bar stays in place initially. The bar may not move up off the ground as the athlete's hips rise. Okay, so they're generating that power just by pushing the hips up in the air and not driving into the floor, or driving or extending at their knee and lifting at their chest. So watch on this lift, in the first pull, the hips shoot up without the shoulders rising and without any drive or extension out of the knees. So the fault we're focusing on again today is the hips shooting up before the shoulders or the knees extend in the first pull. So as you watch on this first snatch, you can clearly see that the bar almost doesn't leave the ground as the hips begin to rise out of the bottom of that first pull. This is something that we want to avoid, and to avoid that, we want to try to lift more at our chest and extend more at our knee on that first pull. Now when you're looking at this next snatch, this is what we actually want to shoot for. You can see as you watch the hip and the shoulder, they're going to rise at the same rate or virtually at the same time. And the athlete keeps a good position pulling all the way through the first pull, and it allows them to get into a good position as they begin their second pull. So the first ways that we want to attack this issue is through our technique. So lowering the weight on the barbell, modifying our technique for it to be correct so we can get some nice clean reps in, done right. And one of the things that you can focus on in the setup, as soon as you put your hands on the bar, is setting that back when you're set up in the bottom before you pull for your first pull. So making sure that you're set up, you take that big deep breath in and actually lift that chest a little bit. So big chest in the bottom of the snatch is what we want to see. Rather than being down in the bottom and kind of sitting down here and kind of being lazy, I'm actually going to sit down here, get myself set, and then just that extra little bit of lift is going to set my back in the proper position and put all of the tension that I need into the bar before I perform my first pull. The second drill we're going to work on in terms of technique is just going to be a seated first pull or a seated partial deadlift. And so what we're focusing on here is driving into the floor with our legs, right? And then lifting at kind of that thoracic spine, lifting at my chest, but keeping my hips in the same spot, right? My hips aren't gonna rise because my butt's gotta stay on the pad, or my butt's gotta stay on the seat, whatever you're on, bench, doesn't matter. So we're gonna set our feet up just like we would for a normal snatch, get the bar set up how we want it, regular snatch grip. So I'm almost down in that normal position, my hips are slightly higher, but all I wanna focus on is lifting the bar up to the top or middle of my knee by utilizing only kind of my back, chest, and driving my knees into the floor. So what that's going to do is, again, cue the athlete to activate their middle back, their lower back, to raise out of the bottom of the snatch or out of the start of that first pull, rather than just shooting their hips into the air, right? We want to get them to understand that that kind of tension and that kind of activation that they want to have on their middle and lower back as they begin their first pull. One more way we can do the same thing then is bring it back to the full setup and focus on just the first pull from the floor to the bottom or top of the knee, right? An emphasis on lifting that chest, driving into the ground, and keeping the hips and shoulders rising at the same rate. All right, now we're gonna talk about a couple different ways that we can strengthen the muscles that we wanna use to avoid that fault in the first pull of the snatch. The first one's going to be a GHD hip extension, right? So if you have a GHD, you wanna set this up so that your hips, or right about your hip crease, right, is going to be right at the edge of the pad. And again, we're gonna focus on lifting at the chest, lifting in our mid back as well as our lower back, and extending at that hip, squeezing at my glutes and hamstrings as I rise up to parallel to the floor, and then lower myself back down under control to perpendicular to the floor. Next one's gonna be the back extension, and you're gonna set up the GHD in the same way. We want our hips to be right on the edge of the pad, but now we're gonna focus more on extending and flexing at our mid back or our thoracic spine, right? We're actually not going to hang our body down perpendicular to the floor. We're gonna keep it fairly parallel, but then really focus just on that middle back flexion and extension. For these two movements, you're looking at anywhere from 3 to 5 sets of 8 to 15 reps. You can add weight as needed, right? But you don't want to add a whole bunch of weight. You don't need to load up a barbell and start doing back extensions, okay? You can add, a 55-pound plate, 25-pound plate, 10-pound plate in your hands till you get comfortable. Make sure you're doing the movement properly with all the correct technique, and slowly overload week to week. So I would say, again, 3 to 5 sets, 8 to 15 repetitions, 2 to 3 times a week. The last move we're going to talk about, and this is probably my favorite one for strengthening your thoracic spine. I know in other videos I've talked about having a kind of a weak T-spine in terms of the front squat caving in. This is a great way to fix that as well and strengthen that area if you're having trouble in the front squat, as well as having trouble feeling what it's like to tighten that mid back, as well as strengthening your middle back. So this movement's gonna be the sumo stance safety squat bar good morning, okay? So we are purposefully actually gonna round our back out here with a load on our back. We don't wanna go super heavy here. You wanna start really, really, really light, okay? This is a 70-pound bar, the safety squat bar is. You can do these with an empty barbell. It's just a more comfortable hand and shoulder position to have your hands down in front here. So if you have access to a safety squat bar, I highly recommend it. Okay, for this movement, for the setup, I'm gonna get my butt to the edge of the seat. I'm gonna have my feet out in a sumo stance. So what qualifies as sumo stance? Ideally, it's your feet are gonna be outside of your shoulders. That's the big thing that we're looking for. My toes are gonna be slightly pointed out, and I do want to drive my knees out, push my feet into the floor, okay? I don't wanna be loose, I don't wanna be relaxed, just like you wouldn't wanna be in the middle of a squat, okay? You wouldn't want your feet caving in. I don't want your feet right underneath your hips here. I want your feet nice and wide on the outside of your shoulders with the bar resting up on top of your shoulders. All right, so to perform this movement, we're gonna unrack the barbell, sit down with our feet outside of our shoulders, legs pressed into the floor, the barbell's on our back. When we go down, we're gonna purposely round out our back, and I like to stop right as I feel my forearms kind of touch my quads. Okay, so right when I get about there, I can feel that I've rounded out my back slightly, and more importantly, when I bring myself back to full extension of my thoracic spine, I'm gonna lift at that chest and make my chest big at the top. I'm really gonna push it forward so I can feel that flex of that muscle. I can really feel utilizing my T-spine to pull the bar back up to upright. And again, we're gonna repeat this between 8 to 15 reps with very light to moderate loads. That's it for the Snatch tutorial today. If you guys got any other questions about this video, throw it down in the comments. If there's anything else you want to see a tutorial on, go ahead and put that down in the comments as well. We'll get to it and see you next time.